My name is Isabella Prescott. I'm 34 years old, and the house everyone tried to steal from me was built years before I ever believed in love. I work as a cybersecurity analyst for a major financial institution in Phoenix, Arizona. The kind of job where silence matters more than praise, where mistakes don't get forgiven, just investigated. For most of my 20s, I worked 60-plus hours a week, staring into monitors long after the city went to sleep, patching vulnerabilities no one would ever thank me for fixing. While my college friends from Arizona State were out drinking on Mill Avenue, I was in a cramped apartment with 2 roommates who treated hygiene like an optional hobby. Moldy dishes, overflowing trash. One of them once tried to argue that soap was bad for the environment. I tolerated it because I had a goal: freedom. At 27, I bought my house. Not a mansion, not flashy. A 4-bedroom, Southwestern-style home in Ahwatukee with a red tile roof, mature palms, and neighbors who waved when you drove by. A quiet street. A finished basement where I built my home office. A backyard big enough for the pool I plan to install one day. Granite countertops that didn't make me feel like I'd failed at adulthood every time I cooked. I put down $75,000, money I'd been saving since graduation. My parents helped with $25,000, which I paid back in under 18 months because I don't like owing anyone, especially not emotionally. That house wasn't just property. It was proof. I met Daniel Walker 4 years later. He was 33, worked in business development, confident, well-spoken. He laughed easily and made people feel like they were interesting just by listening. On our 3rd date, he said he admired how independent I was. I should have noticed how often he said it like a compliment and a warning at the same time. Daniel moved in after a year. The house was already mine, paid into, renovated, documented. He brought clothes, opinions, and expectations. He never offered to help with the mortgage, never asked about property taxes. When the HVAC system needed replacing, he said, "That stuff stresses me out," and went to the gym. His parents visited often. Margaret Walker, perfectly styled, always assessing. Thomas Walker, loud confidence built on inherited assets. They walked through my home like inspectors, commented on upgrades, asked when I planned to redo the kitchen properly. Once, Margaret said, "When Daniel settles down fully, we'll need to talk about making this place more suitable for a family." I laughed it off. That's what women like me do. We excuse early warnings because the alternative is admitting we ignored them on purpose. Daniel had an ex-girlfriend, Lauren. She came up more often than she should have. He framed it as history, unresolved logistics, harmless contact. I believed him, or maybe I wanted to. The day everything broke open, I'd been at work for 16 hours straight, a critical breach, emergency protocols. My eyes burned, my head throbbed. All I wanted was my couch and silence. I turned onto my street and slammed on the brakes. My belongings were scattered across my lawn, not neatly, not carefully. My ASU hoodie lay soaked by the sprinkler system. Boxes of books overturned. My vinyl collection, worth thousands, exposed to the desert sun. My laptop case, clothes, personal things. I parked slowly. Then I saw them. Margaret and Thomas Walker stood near the front door like they owned the place. Designer clothes, smug expressions. Daniel hovered behind them, arms crossed, eyes avoiding mine. Margaret spotted me first. "There she is," she said loudly. "Finally." I felt something strange settle in my chest. Not panic, not fear, clarity. Thomas stepped forward. "Isabella, this arrangement isn't working. You need to gather what's left and leave. We're changing the locks tomorrow." I blinked. "Excuse me? This is Daniel's home now," Margaret snapped. "He deserves stability." Daniel didn't contradict her. He didn't defend me. He just said quietly, "It's over, Isabella. This is better for everyone." Better. I looked at my house, the one I bought years before Daniel ever learned my middle name, the one with only my name on the deed, the one I paid every bill for while he complained about aesthetics. Margaret stepped closer and kicked one of my boxes. That's when I laughed. Not softly, not politely. I laughed because the audacity was so extreme it broke reality. My house, I said. Daniel's house. Wow, when did that happen? Did I miss the paperwork? Margaret's face tightened. Don't mock us. I pulled out my phone. What are you doing? Daniel asked, panic flickering for the first time. Calling the police, I said calmly, for trespassing. Margaret shrieked. This is a family matter. Not on my property, I replied, dialing. Daniel started crying. Real tears this time. Please don't do this. We can talk. I looked at him. And for the first time, I understood exactly who I'd been living with. The sirens came fast, and nothing would ever be the same again. The dispatcher's voice stayed calm in my ear while chaos bloomed in my driveway. Ma'am, are you safe right now? Yes, I said, eyes fixed on Margaret Walker as she paced across my lawn like a general surveying conquered land. But there are 3 people refusing to leave my property. They've moved my belongings outside and are claiming ownership of my home. Margaret heard the word property and scoffed loudly. Listen to her, always hiding behind paperwork. Daniel, tell her. Daniel rubbed his face, hands shaking. Isabella, please, just hang up. My parents are trying to help. Help! Thomas stepped closer, chest puffed out, voice low and patronizing. You're emotional right now. You've been working too much. This is what happens when women forget what matters. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, but my voice stayed even. Years of crisis response training had taught me something valuable. The calmer you are, the more dangerous you become. Step back, I said. He didn't. Margaret jabbed a manicured finger toward my house. Daniel lived here. That gives him rights. No, I replied. It gives him permission, which I've revoked. She laughed sharply. You can't just revoke a relationship. Daniel finally looked at me then, eyes glossy, mouth trembling. You're making this so much harder than it needs to be. Harder than throwing my life onto the lawn? Neighbors had gathered now, phones out, curious faces peeking from behind curtains. I caught Mrs. Alvarez from 2 houses down openly recording. Good. Let them see. Margaret lowered her voice into something sharp and venomous. You think you're smarter than us because you work with computers. Real life doesn't run on code, Isabella. No, I said, but property law does. Thomas laughed, a short, humorless bark. This won't end the way you think it will. Actually, I replied, it already has. Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then away. Lauren says, I cut him off instantly. Do not say her name. Margaret froze. I saw it then, the flicker of realization. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't concern. This was planned. You coordinated this, I said slowly. Didn't you? Daniel swallowed. She just suggested we take space. Lauren, the ex-girlfriend, the ghost who never quite left. Margaret crossed her arms. Daniel deserves a woman who understands sacrifice. I sacrifice plenty, I said, just not my spine. The sound of sirens grew closer. Thomas muttered, This is getting ridiculous. Margaret hissed, She's bluffing. I wasn't. The patrol cars pulled up, red and blue lights washing over my house like judgment. 4 officers stepped out, calm, professional, observant. Everything slowed. One officer approached me. Ma'am, are you the homeowner? Yes, I said, handing over my ID before he even asked. Another officer spoke to Margaret. Ma'am, we need you to step away from the door. This is my son's home, she snapped. She's unstable. The officer raised an eyebrow. Is your name on the deed? Well, then step away from the door. I watched Daniel's face crumble as the officers separated us. I explained everything, the purchase date, the deed, the mortgage, the renovations, the utilities. I pulled up documents on my phone, years of statements neatly archived, proof stacked on proof. Meanwhile, Margaret was growing louder. She works too much. She neglects him. She thinks money is everything. An officer cut her off. Ma'am, lower your voice. Thomas tried intimidation. We know people. The officer didn't blink. So does everyone. When the senior officer returned, his tone was firm. This property belongs solely to Miss Prescott. You have no legal claim. You need to leave immediately. Margaret exploded. This is her partner. You can't just throw him out. Actually, the officer said, she can. Daniel's mouth opened, closed. He looked at me then, not angry, not loving, terrified. Margaret planted her heels into my grass. We are not leaving. The officer nodded once. 2 seconds later, Margaret was being escorted by the arm toward the sidewalk, shrieking about connections and lawsuits. Thomas followed, protesting loudly, dignity evaporating with every step. Daniel lingered. He looked at me like he wanted to say something meaningful, something redemptive. He said nothing. When they were gone, the lawn was quiet again. My lawn. The officer turned to me. I recommend changing your locks tonight. I already planned to, I said. As the cars drove away, my phone lit up with messages. Rage, guilt, please. I ignored them all. I picked up my things one by one, carefully, deliberately. And for the first time that night, I felt something stronger than anger, relief. The quiet after the patrol cars left felt unnatural, like the air itself was holding its breath. I stood alone in my driveway, surrounded by pieces of my life that had been treated like debris. Boxes leaned at awkward angles. My hoodie still clung damply to the grass. One corner of my vinyl crate had split, sleeves bent, records half slid out like they'd tried to escape. I didn't cry. Not yet. I carried everything inside slowly, methodically, checking damage as if I were cataloging evidence at work. Because that's what this was now, an incident, a breach, a failure of trust that required documentation. Inside the house, silence pressed in from every room. Daniel's shoes were still by the door. His jacket hung on the hook like it belonged to someone who might come back. He wasn't coming back. My phone buzzed. Daniel, please answer. This got out of hand. I stared at the screen. Out of hand. As if his parents had tripped and accidentally attempted to steal my house. I locked the door. Then I locked it again. Then I went room by room, checking windows, back doors, the side gate. Familiar routines snapped back into place. Control returned in small increments. Another message. Margaret, you humiliated us. You will regret this. I blocked her. Thomas, this isn't over. Blocked. Daniel tried again. Daniel, Lauren says you're overreacting. I laughed, once, sharp and joyless, and blocked him too. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen island with my laptop open, reviewing documents I already knew by heart. Deed, purchase date, mortgage, title insurance, every utility bill in my name. I emailed copies to myself, then to a secure cloud folder, then printed them out like redundancy alone could prevent betrayal. At 3:17 a.m., I saw it. The Instagram post. Daniel must have forgotten that his account was still logged in on the shared tablet. A photo of him sitting on a hotel bed, head in hands. Caption: sometimes the person you trust most turns on you. Margaret had commented a heart. Thomas commented, proud of you for standing up for yourself, son. Lauren liked it. That was the moment something inside me cooled completely. By morning, the story was already shifting. Friends texting me cautiously. Coworkers saying they'd heard something happened. A vague narrative forming where Daniel was the victim of a cold, controlling woman who valued property over people. I didn't correct anyone. I called a locksmith instead. By noon, every lock in the house was changed. New codes, new keys, old access revoked permanently. The locksmith handed me the invoice. Rough night? You have no idea, I said. My second call was to a divorce attorney. Not because I was married, we weren't, but because she specialized in property disputes involving domestic partners and entitled families. She listened quietly as I explained everything, then said something that grounded me instantly. You did exactly what you should have done. Good. 2 days later, Daniel showed up. Not at the door. At the sidewalk. He stood there like a ghost, hands in his pockets, eyes red. I watched him through the security camera for a full minute before opening the door. just enough to step outside, keeping the threshold firmly behind me. "I just want to talk," he said. "No," I replied. "You want absolution." He flinched. "I never meant for them to throw your stuff out," he said quickly. "Lauren said—" "There it is," I cut in. "Still outsourcing your decisions." He ran a hand through his hair. "She just understands what it's like to feel pushed out." "I didn't push you out," I said. "I refused to hand you something you didn't earn." His eyes filled. "You're choosing a house over us." "No," I said softly. "I'm choosing myself over people who think love entitles them to ownership." He took a step forward. I stepped back. "That's close enough." For a moment, he looked like he might argue. Then he sagged. "My parents think you're cold." I almost smiled. "Tell them I'm thorough," I said. He nodded slowly, as if committing that to memory, then turned and walked away. That afternoon, the letter arrived, a formal notice, filed by Thomas Walker's attorney, claiming equitable interest in the property due to Daniel's contributions. I forwarded it to my attorney without comment. She replied 10 minutes later, "This will not go well for them." Court came faster than they expected. Margaret arrived dressed for battle. Thomas wore confidence like armor. Daniel sat between them, eyes downcast, shrinking by the second. Lauren wasn't there. The judge listened. The documents spoke. The timeline was clear. The ruling was swift. No claim, no interest, no standing. Margaret's face collapsed in slow motion, Thomas argued. The judge shut him down. Daniel said nothing. Outside the courthouse, Margaret hissed, "This isn't justice." I met her gaze calmly. "No, this is accountability." They left without another word. Weeks passed. The noise faded. The lies lost traction. People stopped asking questions. One evening, I sat on my back patio, glass of wine in hand, watching the sun drop behind the mountains. The house was quiet again. Mine again. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. The silence after the court ruling wasn't peaceful. It was strategic. For the first week, nothing happened. No messages, no posts, no surprise appearances. It felt like standing in an empty hallway after a fire alarm, too quiet to be real. Then the story started mutating online. It began subtly. A repost here, a vague quote there. Some women confuse independence with control. Just because something is legal doesn't mean it's right. Margaret shared them all. She never named me. She didn't have to. Anyone who knew the situation knew exactly who the villain was supposed to be. Daniel stayed quiet publicly. That should have been my first warning. Lauren, however, did not. She posted a photo of herself hiking Camelback Mountain, sunlit, serene, intentional. The caption read, "When you choose peace over possessions." The implication was surgical. I watched it without reacting. I didn't comment, didn't block, didn't defend myself. At work, I'd learned that systems collapse faster when you let them reveal their own flaws. Friends asked questions, carefully, as if stepping on emotional landmines. "Are you okay? That must have been awful. I heard some things." I answered honestly, but briefly. I didn't counter-narrate. I didn't explain myself into exhaustion. The people who mattered noticed. The ones who didn't were never really mine. 2 weeks later, Daniel emailed me. Not texted, not called. An email. Long, apologetic. Structured like a confession written by someone who hoped formatting could make betrayal digestible. He said he was sorry, that he'd felt pressured, that his parents had strong opinions, that Lauren had helped him see things clearly. He said he missed me. He said he didn't recognize himself anymore. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I replied with one sentence. "I recognize you perfectly now." I archived the email. The retaliation escalated after that. Margaret contacted my employer. Not directly. Never that sloppy. She sent an anonymous tip suggesting I was emotionally unstable and unfit for a role involving sensitive financial systems. HR called me in. They were professional, neutral, apologetic. I handed them documentation. Court transcripts, police reports, the recorded voicemail Margaret had left me screaming threats after the eviction. The HR director read silently, then looked up and said, "Thank you for bringing this to us. We'll handle it." They did. The anonymous tips stopped. Margaret's Facebook account went private shortly after. I thought that would be the end. It wasn't. Daniel showed up again, this time unannounced, just after sunset. I saw him on the security feed, standing at the gate, posture hesitant, hands empty like that was supposed to mean something. I didn't open the door. I spoke through the intercom. "You shouldn't be here." "I just need 5 minutes," he said. "Please." "No," I replied. "You need permission, which you don't have." There was a long pause. "I moved out of my parents' house," he said quickly, like a child offering proof of growth. "Lauren and I aren't talking anymore." That was new. "And?" I asked. "And I messed up," he said. "I let them control everything. I let them turn me against you." "Yes," I agreed calmly. Another pause. Longer this time. "I thought if I sided with them, things would calm down," he said. "I didn't think you'd cut me off like this." That one almost made me laugh. "You tried to remove me from my own life," I said. "This is the calm." He exhaled shakily. "I loved you." "I believe that," I said. And it still wasn't enough. He stood there for a full minute after that, then nodded once, like he'd finally understood the shape of the loss. He never came back. The legal closure arrived quietly. A final notice from the court confirming dismissal with prejudice. No appeals, no standing, no future claims. My attorney sent a short message. "They can't touch you anymore." I printed it. Framed it, not because I needed proof, but because I wanted a reminder. The online narrative fizzled next. Without new material, outrage starves. Lauren moved on to subtler content. Margaret retreated into private bitterness. Thomas stopped pretending this had ever been about principle. And me? I reclaimed my routines. Morning coffee on the patio. Evening walks through the neighborhood. Quiet dinners where no one critiqued my priorities. I installed the pool. It wasn't about luxury. It was about permanence. One night, floating under the desert stars, I thought about how close I'd come to losing all of this. Not legally, but emotionally. How easy it would have been to doubt myself into surrender. People like the Walkers thrive on that moment. The hesitation, the apology they think you owe them for refusing to be taken. I didn't hesitate. And that changed everything. The last piece of paperwork arrived on an ordinary Tuesday. No drama, no ceremony, just a thick envelope slipped into my mailbox while I was at work. The return address from the county clerk's office, stamped in dull black ink. I didn't open it right away. I set it on the kitchen counter, washed my hands, fed the cat, changed out of my work clothes. I let normal life surround it, dilute its importance. Then I opened it. Final disposition. No claim, no appeal, no further action permitted. That was it. Years of entitlement reduced to a few sterile sentences. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same one Daniel once complained was too small for entertaining, and let the reality settle. Not relief exactly. Something steadier, something quieter. Closure doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives like weight lifting off your chest so slowly you don't notice until you breathe deeper without trying. Daniel never contacted me again. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved into a one-bedroom apartment across town, that he'd changed jobs, that he was working on himself. People said this like it was a redemption arc instead of a consequence. Margaret and Thomas Walker retreated into selective amnesia. At a neighborhood fundraiser months later, someone mentioned them in passing, how they'd had a misunderstanding with their son's ex. A misunderstanding. I didn't correct it. I'd learned something important through all of this. Truth doesn't need constant defense. It just needs time and consistency. The house changed after that. Not physically at first, though I eventually repainted, replaced the couch Daniel hated, rearranged the office, but emotionally. The air felt lighter. Rooms stopped holding tension. I realized how much space I'd been sharing with someone else's expectations. One evening, as I sorted through old boxes in the basement, I found a folder labeled Future Plans. Inside were printouts Daniel had made years ago. Dream homes, renovation ideas, family projections. Every single one assumed the house wasn't really mine. I shredded the folder without hesitation. The final ripple came unexpectedly. Lauren tried to follow me on Instagram. No message, no explanation, just the request. I stared at her profile for a long moment. The curated calm, the aesthetic resilience, the quiet implication that she'd survived something. Then I declined. Some chapters don't deserve acknowledgement. The neighborhood remembered, though, not the gossip. The outcome. People waved more deliberately. Mrs. Alvarez brought over cookies one afternoon and said, "You handled that with a lot of dignity." I thanked her. What I didn't say was that dignity wasn't a performance. It was a decision. One I'd made the moment I refused to be displaced from my own life. On the anniversary of buying the house, I hosted a small dinner. Just close friends, no pretenses, no proving anything. We ate on the patio under string lights. Someone asked if I'd ever consider letting someone move in again. I smiled and said, "Only if they understand what ownership actually means." Later that night, after everyone left, I walked through the rooms slowly. The kitchen, where I defended myself. The doorway Daniel had stood in, asking for forgiveness too late. The living room, where silence had replaced chaos. I realized something then. This wasn't just about property. It was about boundaries. Entitled people rely on hesitation, on your fear of being seen as difficult, on the hope that you'll prioritize peace over fairness. They expect you to shrink. I didn't. And that refusal cost them everything they thought they deserved. I turned off the lights, locked the doors, and went to bed in a house that was fully, finally, mine. Not because I won, but because I never surrendered.